Good evening, friends. We welcome you to 38th meeting of the study circle. I request Mr. Ashok Pati to give an introduction to today's resource person.
Good evening, friends. Today the topic is land tenure and related issues, a topic of great importance in case of litigation based on immovable property, usage of land, title scrutiny. This becomes the hot topic, and the most of the time we are puzzled, and invariably we close our eyes to some of the terms and blindly go about. Today is an opportunity for us to learn more about this, because land tenure actually controls how a land is to be used, what are the rights that are involved in it, and how the transferability has to happen. In short, we can say the land tenure decides who can use a property, what types of resources can be used in a property, how long can that resources be used, and what are the conditions in it. So there is a lot of history behind these land tenure enactments. We would have seen that most of the words would be in Urdu. So they have a lot of history involved in it, a lot of politics into it. British had come and changed many things. So this particular topic is going to be not only with respect to law, but also covers various aspects of politics and history. And today for this important topic, we have senior advocate Mr. S.K. Mani with us, who will be talking to us. Mr. S.K. Mani was born in 1948 on 7th of January, and that year blossomed for the land tenure also, I would say. With the speech today, it will be confirmed. He had his studies in undergraduation in physics. No wonder he is able to understand the length and breadth of this land tenure. And he did his physics in Government Law College, Kumbakonam. Thereafter, he went on to do his law from the Madras Law College, and he enrolled himself as an advocate from 1974 onwards. He obtained his master's in labor law and administrative law and started his early practice in Tanjavur District Court. Thereafter, shifted to Tiruchirappalli District Court, and after that, while practicing in Tiruchirappalli High Court, District Court, he was the president of the bar there for the year 2006 and 2007. Once the bench of the Madras High Court had commenced in Madurai, no looking back, he has been practicing there and also having an illustrious practice in the trial court. Without much ado, I would not stand before you and the speaker. So I request the speaker now to commence his speech. Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen, brothers, and friends. The land tenure, as the name indicates, the tenure relates to real estate, land, property. There was a land tenure in Madras Presidency, as it was originally called, has been traced by a lawyer, Mr. Sundarraj Iyengar, in High Court Madras at that time. He wrote this book in 1916. It's the most important one. His book is Colossus. And from this book, we can trace the history of the land tenure. And I request you to consider this aspect firstly, that before we get into the legal aspects and the legislations are there, we have to look into the history of the land tenure from pre-British days or pre-Mohammedan days in India, rather specifically in Madras Presidency. You all know the Madras Presidency was comprising the southern states, Andhra Pradesh, original Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. This Madras Presidency was a wide region. Throughout this wide region, this land tenure has been same almost, except to some differences, maybe there, small differences, maybe there here and there. Therefore, this land tenure as such has been well-defined relationship, especially the land, agricultural land, has been the main code of this entire land tenure. And important, the village is a basic unit. Before I invite you to see that the common law of England may be there, the common law of India, that common law, it is around these villages as a unit. First unit is a village, and the king is regarding England and India, we have a difference. In India, the land belongs to the person cultivating the same. But in England, the land belongs to the king. So when the English came into India, they faced a problem with this in India. Originally, they started things in Bengal, then in Madras Presidency. Now, the thing is, the land as such, as such, was distributed among different relationships between cultivators and the persons who are said to be owners of land or said to be in control of the land. There was what is called Zamindari system that started in Mohammedan period. Even before that, there was Zamindari system. And the Zamindari system is one where the Zamindars are expected or were expected to be the holders of the land. And the ryots, the cultivators were under him, they will pay the rent to the Zamindar. Zamindar will collect them. And what happened? The king, rather I put it like that because it has a king origin also. The king will have the tax. The tax. King will have the tax. In England, it is rent. In India, it is tax. The king will have the tax imposed on the land depending upon the nature of the land, character of the soil, firstly, and depending upon the various varieties of products involved in the cultivation. So, the Zamindari system was sought to be naturalized under the act called Estates Land Act 1908. The Estates Land Act 1908 sanctified the Zamindars to be the owners of the land. And there were two situations. One is, I invite you to a different, a sort of different relationships in reference to the cultivator under such owners. Among these cultivators and owners, I am now introducing the Zamindari system, and that was originally I told you that Zamindari system was previously organized in such a manner in Madras Permanent Settlement Regulation Act 1802. This system was abolished and it was converted into right-to-worry system. The right-to-worry system is permanently coming. I think that it is permeating throughout this this land tenure, the land relationship. The cultivator on the one side and the zamindar or the estate landholder on the other side. So between these two entities, the cultivator will have to cultivate and produce, and out of the produce, the cultivator will have to give a share to the zamindar, estate landholder, and this estate landholder will pay the kist or tax to the government, and that is the system that was going on. There is also side by side another system called Inam. This Inam system is the most complicated system among the land tenure. There are two types of Inams. Whole village Inam, it is called. Entire village will be given free of tax. what is called in Tamil, Irai Ili Nilam. Irai means tax. Irai Ili Nilam. When he finds some scholars, some persons the king wants to favor some persons, then he will grant this what is called the land without tax. The history goes, it was in a temple in Tanjavur district. A Devadasi was relieved from the relieved from the land Inam. Then, and it was given to some other person by the king, Rajaraja Cholan. Then what happened? The Devadasi climbed up the tower of the temple and committed suicide. So this land tenure, in the land tenure, Inam acquires a very most important space, and this space is this way differentiated. I shall introduce you now what is Melvaram and what is Kudivaram. Melvaram is one where the estate holder or the Inamdar, what we call the person Inam holder, whole village Inam is given to a person without a tax. Then the whole village Inamdar will give the lands to different entire village. Then he give the lands to different riots who are called Kudivaram Dars. Sometimes this Kudivaram and Melvaram will be residing in one person, one Inamdar himself. Sometimes there may be different relationship, different types of situation. Say, therefore, the situation was that the Inamdar was having Melvaram normally, and the riot was having the Kudivaram. A riot having Kudivaram will be more important, a person cultivating. That is in the Inam settlement. And there is also minor Inam. Minor Inam, not the whole village Inam. It is with reference to some tracts in the village for certain services rendered by they just like Pujaris and the Devdasi and others. Then even then small persons who are working like them in the village tools, artisans, and some even Brahmins were given something what is called the minor inams. This minor inam is different. It is service oriented, so that is little different. And again, this that is apart from this zamindari estate land and inam land, there are other tracts of lands which are connected with these two relationships, and this is riotwari land. Most of the lands have been riotwari in throughout India. In Madras President also, there is no exception to this. And this riotwari system, there were landlords, there were separate landlords, and there were tenants, cultivating tenants. The issue involved is the Kudivaram is not in such riotwari tracts. The Kudivaram is only restricted to Zamindari and Inamdar system. Therefore, we have to appreciate this relationship basically when estate lands relationship was sought to be abolished. 1948, Estate Lands Act was brought into existence, abolishing the estates. Then patta was given to landholder as well as the right. The difference is when the Melvaram and Kudivaram is residing in the Inamdar estate holder, the patta will be given to the estate holder for the land. And if the land is being cultivated by a riot, if the Kudivaram is residing in the riot, then patta will be given to riot. The riot will have the land assigned to him as his own land. He will be released from the hold of the landholder, and this is similarly also in Inam. The similar situation is there in 1963. Tamil Nadu Inam estate, the Inam estate was abolished, and it was considered. First is 1948, Madras Estate abolition and conversion to Right to Worry Act 1948. And regarding this Inam abolition, Inam Tamil Nadu Inam Estate bracket Abolition Act 1963. Then in the same year, Tamil Nadu Inam's abolition and conversion into Right to Worry Act 1963 was with reference to minor Inam. Therefore, these two major Inam, which may be called for understanding purpose, major Inam and minor Inam. But there is no major Inam in law. But only to whole village Inam. It is called whole village. Entire village will have to be comprised as a Inam. Therefore, in these two sets of relationship, then the Inam estate also, in Inam estate also, similarly, Melvaram, Kudivaram. If Melvaram is with the Inamdar, then the patta will be given to the Inamdar. And if the Kudivaram is residing in the Rayat, the cultivator, patta will be given to the Rayat. Similarly, there are lands which were not coming into either these two groups. Then it will be kept separate, and separate proceedings schemes have been provided with the government to grant patta to landless agricultural laborers. So this is the system of this zamindari system abolition and this Inam abolition provided that they are called settlement officers. The officers who inquired into these aspects are called as settlement officers. I'm not going into details because this is an oceanic subject. Therefore, I'm just introducing this thing. But now we see that most of the Inam state cases are almost little. We is only in history of legislative the court hearings. Only very few cases will be found here and there. Therefore, I request you to see the point. Then the problem of relationship between the Kudivaram and Kudivaram Dar and the Melvaram Dar. The problem arose specifically in one of the cases, recent cases, where hereditary Pujari, he had a minor Inam holding as a Pujari of the temple. He was claiming right over the property as he is having both Kudivaram and Melvaram, as if he is having like that. He was trying to say it was given for a service Inam to me, minor Inam. Therefore, I am having more right over the property. Then it was acquired for providing arrangements for households. For that purpose, there is a special act, and it was acquired. And when it was acquired, the land acquisition Tahsildar had to apportion the amount to different persons, and that is temple and this Pujari. Pujari claimed that he is having Kudivaram, but it was found in records Kudivaram is with the temple. Therefore, 75% of the amount was given to temple, and the apportionment that was claimed by Pujari was cancelled. And this was the impugned order of the settlement officer was set aside, directing to follow the ratio laid in Union of India versus Manapalli Krishnamurthy, reported in 2019, volume 2, MVN Civil 149. And this judgment of Pujari matter is reported in 2020 one volume, first volume, CTC, page 465. And another important thing is regarding the State Lands Act, as I already submitted, this created conversion problems, and similar litigations were going on, and I am not able to to go on in details in this matter. And my interest is in providing the large canvas of the land tenure. Therefore, there are many different issues involved. Then pattas, the patta is an issue in land tenure. As I submitted already, patta will be given in Estate Abolition Act 1948. Patta will be given in enormous proceedings also, abolition proceedings also. When such a patta is given, there is also another patta already submitted. Patta is different. Patta is Raitwari patta normally. So these pattas are different categories of patta are there. What is the effect of this patta? Is it a document of title? That's the most important question that has got to be gone into. In Raitwari areas, patta is given by the government. That patta is not, but at the same time, when patta is given in estate abolition proceedings and also in enormous estate abolition proceedings by the settlement officer, Tahsildar mostly, and this patta is a document of title, because it cannot be otherwise. It gives a title to the land in question. By giving the title in land in question, the assignment like thing is given in recognized also to the cultivator, mostly cultivators. Therefore, the patta given under the and another patta is given under the Land Ceiling Act. And when land ceiling legislation came in, it was the Land Reform Fixation of Ceiling in 1961. Tamil Nadu brought land reforms, and that's the revolutionary aspect also is there. And this revolutionary aspect brought in surplus lands, and the surplus lands were sought to be assigned to landless poor, landless agricultural laborers, and these pattas or assignments, giving them the title to the land. The assignment, it is through assignment. The patta symbolizes the assignment as is given under the estate lands and as is given in the other estate lands abolition and enormous abolition. And there is also another thing we have to see. During the history of land legislation, we can find two legislations. One is protection given to the cultivating tenants. As I already submitted, in the Raitwari Tract, there are tenants, cultivating tenants. Those tenants, cultivating tenants, maybe with a written agreement and maybe orally. Either way, there is a contract of relationship of tenant and landlord. But what happened? There is no clear record of this relationship, and as a result, anytime fire and fire like that, any tenant can be sent out, removed, evicted from the land, and you will be lost. You lose the entire basis of his living, and this will be the situation. Therefore, the cultivated tenants were almost the stooges of the landlords. That was a system. To abolish this, to protect the land cultivating tenants, the Cultivating Tenants Protection Act came into existence. And this Cultivating Tenants Protection Act, that also brought so many litigations. And this Cultivating Tenants Protection Act created a revolutionary situation in Madras presidency, especially in Tamil Nadu, because then the Tamil Nadu became a separate one due to the division of the Madras presidency into language-wise states. Therefore, to protect the interest of the cultivating tenant, there is also another legislation had to be brought in. Who is the tenant? Anybody may claim as a tenant, but he may not be a tenant. If he has got some circumstance, he may claim that he is a tenant. For this, a situation was brought in, and this issue was addressed to by, again, the Tamil Nadu Legislative Assembly. Tamil Nadu Agricultural Record of Tenancy Rights 1969 was enacted. And this created several legislation, several litigations. And these litigations also go into the sea of litigations in the High Court as well as in the Supreme Court. And one important case is there was a bar of jurisdiction for civil court. Whether civil court is totally barred from even incidentally questioning whether a person is a cultivating tenant or not. So, a cultivating tenant, whether he is a cultivating tenant or not, is a very important question. And Agriculture Record of Tenancy Rights and Cultivating Tenants Protection Act are same sister legislations. And I want to invite your attention that the cultivating tenant is one who bestows his physical labor in the tilling of the soil or that of the labor of his family members, unless such a physical labor is bestowed in the tilling of the soil, or that of the member of the family of the tenant concerned is bestowed in the tilling of the soil, he cannot be a cultivating tenant. There may be many intermediaries. Therefore, these legislations clearly provided definite category of persons who can be cultivating tenants. This rather protected the real tenant. That's the most important thing I want to submit. In any event, there was a question. A full bench came into the question whether the High Court or the Civil Court has no right to question, to enter into question whether a person is a tenant or not, even incidentally, as I submitted already. Then it was decided by the full bench of the Madras very famous case, Periyathambai Counter versus District Revenue Officer, reported in IIR 1980, Madras, page 180. This is the most star case in this aspect. As a result of this such decisions, the matter has been now it is normal, almost normalized. But even now, the issue whether a person is a tenant is a big issue. If the land must be an agricultural land, an agricultural land nowadays is put to real estate business, then there are certain legislations, certain prohibitions, certain restrictions. Anyhow, that real estate is flourishing. Thereby, cultivating lands are converted into real estate. The issue is whether the land once cultivating it was, later on got into a real estate. For this purpose, the land is not at all cultivated for some years. It is laid fallow. As a result, when persons come and visit the land, it will be found as a fallow land. The village administrative officer will record no cultivation. Then the question is, what will be the relationship between the cultivating tenant and the landlord? For a person to be a cultivating tenant, he must cultivate the land. If he is not cultivating, he cannot be a tenant at all. Therefore, basically, the land is not a cultivable one, it is a barren land. So, when the land has become a barren land, he cannot be called a person who is in possession of the land, cannot be called as a cultivating tenant. There are litigations on this aspect also. In any event, the most other important aspect is Tamil Nadu occupants of Kudiyiruppu Conferment of Ownership Act 1971. And this act is the most interesting thing because 4 persons who have been residing in a hut for a century, for even generations together. And the land, the site of the Kudiyiruppu, the house, the hut, will be belonging to some other landlord, some other person. And this poor person, either as an agricultural laborer or as a cultivating man or anything like that in the rural area, is residing there for generations. But at any time, he may be evicted from that property. He may go houseless. And this situation was prevented, and a Kudiyiruppudarar was given protection by this legislation. And this is the most important legislation in this aspect. And Kudiyiruppu is the one where the land is belonging to some other person, and the person who is having a house therein will be called the Kudiyiruppudarar, and the Kudiyiruppudarar will be given the protection, will be given the title over the site. And that's the proceedings initiated in the Conferment of Ownership Act of Kudiyiruppu in 1971. So this also extended to artisans. Tamil Nadu Rural Artisans Conferment of Ownership Kudiyiruppu Act 1976. That was also passed subsequently by the Tamil Nadu legislature. Therefore, the civil court's jurisdiction in these matters is barred. A small person living in a hut, if he is called into a litigation, what will happen? He will certainly disown anything and will go away. Therefore, the civil court's jurisdiction, which is a costly enterprise for ordinary persons, is barred. And the issue is, and that is whether any person is an agriculturist or agricultural laborer, or whether any site is a Kudiyiruppu, as the same is within the exclusive jurisdiction of the authorized officer. Section 3B of the Tamil Nadu Rural Artisan Conferment of Ownership Kudiyiruppu Act 1976 provides that there must be, in a case as cited in once again R. Veerappan versus Shanmugavel, that is reported in AIR 1982, Madras 445. Rural artisans having right over the site in which they are living became the beneficiaries to own the site in which they are residing. The problem was patta was there. What is a patta? Patta for the site, and this was also decided within the exclusive jurisdiction of the officer, authorized officer, and that is the above decision, 1982 decision, provided that nobody can enter into this the question. The civil court cannot go into the question to decide this, and that was decided within the exclusive jurisdiction of the authorized officers concerned. And again, as I submitted already, that the patta was not a title, document of title, and it was decided, I'll say, already submitted 1914 itself. His Lordship Sardar Shiva Meyer has given the ruling that government is not responsible for a statutory obligation to issue any patta to right for proprietors. Therefore, I submit this. Patta has been the problem in many places for many persons, and anyhow, this has been almost ironed out now, and the situation is now normal and common. The main patta, the patta should be in the name of the holder of the land, extent, survey number, and also the name of the village. What is a patta? A patta shall be in the name of the person concerned, and the land, the extent, the survey number, and the name of the village shall be entered in the patta. The registration of alienation of these lands have to be, whether patta is a document which is necessary. Then a situation came and the Patta Passbook Act 1983 was passed. Patta Passbook Act 1983 is a very elaborate act. That act provides, as I already indicated, that patta patta not being a document or title in the right or tract, but here the patta of the agricultural land, as found in this book, is almost a document of title. The Patta Passbook it is called. The Patta Passbook will be having Patta Passbook. Yes. The land means, land, the definition of land is, land means agricultural land, that is to say, land which is used or capable of being used for agricultural purposes or purposes subservient thereto, and is either assessed to land revenue in the state or is subject to local rate assessed and collected by officers of the government as such, and includes horticultural land, forest land, garden land, plantations, but does not include outside. So this definition of land, as I submitted already, this in this Patta Passbook, the owner, limited owner means any person entitled to a life estate in any land, and includes a person deriving rights through him, especially a person who has a right to enjoy the land during his lifetime shall be deemed to be a limited owner, notwithstanding that he has no power to alienate it. Because in many cases, women are given life estate, and that life estate will be for the lifetime, during the lifetime, and that is the person called a limited owner. And a owner means any person under clause 6 of the definition, subclass 6. Owner means any person holding land in severally or jointly or in common under a right over his settlement, or in any land anyway subject to the payment of revenue direct to the government, and includes a full owner or limited owner, but does not include a mortgagee, a lessee, or a tenant. And a Patta Passbook means the Patta Passbook that is issued under section 3. Person includes any firm, company, etc. So that is not much necessary now. Registering authority means the registering officer appointed at Registration Act. Tahsildar means the Tahsildar having jurisdiction over the land where it is situated. Then issue of Patta Passbook is under section 3. Then again, the most important thing is that the taluk should be the unit for the issue of Patta Passbook. Normally it is given. Even now, some persons are not given. That is another matter for complaint before the revenue officials. Then the notice, there shall be notice issued. The notice shall contain such further particulars and shall be published in such manner as may be prescribed. That is B. That provides in section 3 for notice that such person is issued under this act to every owner, and such owner shall apply for the issue of Patta Passbook as provided in this section. So notice shall be issued to all people. The application has to be made by them, and after application, if no application has been made by any owner within the limited time, found in 4, subclass 4, in respect of any land, the Tahsildar shall, based on the entries made in the records available in his office, cause a notice to be served on the owner concerned personally. So this goes to the effect that the threadbare, if you look into it, the Patta Passbook Act has been most beneficial in the agricultural sector. That is why I submit the Patta Passbook that is now in existence as it is more useful. And another thing, the Patta Passbook question is that there arose a case. Land transfer was made by one person, and at that time he did not use this Patta Passbook. He had some differences in that transaction, sale transaction of this land. He sold the land again to some another person, third party, without the transfer being cancelled, the first sale not being cancelled. Then it arose, a litigation came into existence. Then, as per the Patta Passbook Act, the section 5 provides that no document relating to transfer of any land by sale, gift, mortgage, exchange, settlement, or otherwise shall be registered by the registering authority unless the Patta Passbook relating to such land is produced before such a registering authority. So, the Patta Passbook must be produced before the registering authority for verifying the credentials of the person trying to sell the property. No document in subsection 1 shall be registered by the registering authority unless the person liable to pay the registration fees also pays to the registering authority such fees as may be prescribed for making the necessary entries relating to such a transfer in the Patta Passbook. On the registration of such document and after making necessary entries in the Patta Passbook, the registering authority shall make a report of such registration and also send a certificate of extract of the said entries to the Tahsildar concerned. Therefore, on receipt of the certified extracts of the entries relating to the such transfer, the Tahsildar shall cause necessary changes to be carried out in the register of Patta Passbook maintained by him and shall also cause necessary changes to be carried out in the Patta Passbook already issued under section 3 or as the case may be, issue a new Patta Passbook at a subdivision if necessary within such time and on collection of such fee as may be prescribed. Therefore, prima facie, section 6 provides prima facie entries in the Patta Passbook or issued by the Tahsildar shall be prima facie evidence of title of the person in whose name the Patta Passbook has been issued to the parcels of land entered in the Patta Passbook, free of any prior encumbrance unless otherwise specified therein. Therefore, I request you to remember that Patta originally the right to origin tract is not a document of title, but Patta provided under the Inam Abolition Act, under the Estate Abolition Act, they are the documents of title prima facie. And similarly, the Patta Passbook now, as it is brought into legislation, it's prima facie evidence of title of the person who is holding the same in the name, his name printed therein. Therefore, the acquisition of rights, any person acquiring by succession or by survivorship, inheritance, partition, purchase, or otherwise, or by decree or order of a court, or by order of a government or other authority, any right in or over any land as owner shall report in writing his acquisition of such right to the Tahsildar within 3 months from the date of such acquisition and within such further period as may be prescribed, and the said officer shall give in written acknowledgement of the receipt of the report to the person making it, provided that when the person acquiring the right is a minor or otherwise disqualified, his guardian or other person having charge of his property shall make the report to the Tahsildar, provided further that any person acquiring a right by virtue of a registered document shall be exempted from obligation to report to the Tahsildar. Therefore, this legislation, this explanation also provides a person in whose favor a mortgage is discharged or extinguished acquires a right within the meaning of this section. Therefore, and receipt of this, therefore, this has got to be properly recorded, registered, and the Tahsildar also has to be very prompt in making the records, making in these records the entries of such communication. The certificate copies can be given. Application for certificate copies of entries in the register of Patta Passbook may be made, and such copies can be issued by the Tahsildar. And again, presentation of Patta Passbook before credit agency. Before obtaining, mostly cooperative societies and other bank and other credit agencies may be there, and the Patta Passbook section 9 provides the Patta Passbook can be presented before the credit agency, and credit agency shall cause the necessary entries being made in the Patta Passbook, giving particulars of such financial assistance or loan or the charge of or the charge and mortgage or charge or mortgage created by the owner in respect of the land in the respective columns provided in the Patta Passbook in such manner as may be prescribed. A copy of the extract of such entries shall also be sent to the credit agency by the credit agency to the Tahsildar within such period as may be prescribed. On receipt of such copy of extract, the Tahsildar shall make the necessary entries of the grant of such financial assistance or loan and the creation of charge or mortgage in respect of the land held by such owner in the register of Patta Passbook maintained by him. So there can be modification because as changes came in land relationship, always there will be changes by transfer and other aspects and circumstances. Though modification of entries in the Patta Passbook has to be done in section 10, and similarly the application that has got to be carried out by the very person claims that any modification is required in respect of any entry in the Patta Passbook already issued under section 3, either by reason of death of any person or by reason of a transfer of the land or by reason of any other subsequent change in the circumstances, he shall make an application to the Tahsildar for the modification of the relevant entries in the Patta Passbook. The application under subsection shall contain such particulars as may be prescribed that regarding the details of the land, etc. And in section 3, subclass 3 also, before passing an order and an application under subsection 1, the Tahsildar shall follow such procedure as may be prescribed and shall also give reasonable opportunity to the parties concerned to make their representation either orally or in writing. If the Tahsildar decides that any modification should be made in respect of the entries in the Patta Passbook, he shall pause an order accordingly and shall make such consequential changes in the Patta Passbook as appear to him be necessary for giving effect to his order. Therefore, this section 10 provides the manner and mode in which detail the modifications that are required to be entered in the Patta Passbook. And the persons, section 11 provides any person whose rights or interests are required to be or have been entered into in any Patta Passbook under this act shall be bound on the requisition of the Tahsildar engaged in preparing or modifying the entries in the Patta Passbook to furnish or produce for his inspection within the within such time as may be specified in such requisition, or within such further time as the Tahsildar may in his discretion allow, all such informations or documents needed for such a correct preparation and or revision thereof as may be within his knowledge or in his possession and power. So this involves the information that has to be furnished, and the Tahsildar has to inquire, and he can get the particulars from the persons who are having the Patta passport. Appeal, any person appeal, 12 section provides appeal. Any person aggrieved by an order made with Tahsildar under this act may within such period as may be prescribed appeal to such authority as may be prescribed, and the decision of such authority on such appeal shall subject to the provisions of section 13 be final. The revision also goes any officer of the revenue department not below the rank of district revenue officer authorized by the government by notification in this before for such area may be specified in the notification, may in his own motion or on the application of a party call for and examine the records of any Tahsildar or appropriate appellate authority within his jurisdiction in respect of any proceedings under this act, and pass such orders as he may think fit, provided that no such order can to the order prejudicial to any person shall be made unless he has been given a reasonable opportunity of making his representation. And this goes on like this. Appeal and revision are provided with the concerned revenue authorities, and the bar of suits is there. No suit shall lie against the government or any officer of the government in respect of a claim to have an entry made in any Patta passport that is maintained under this act, or to have any such entry omitted or amended, provided that if any person is aggrieved as to any right of which he is in possession by an entry made in the Patta passport under this act, he may institute a suit for a declaration of his right under the chapter 6 of the Special Relief Act 1963, and then the entry in the Patta passport shall be amended in accordance with any such declaration. And now we can see the sections, most importantly, the sections 9, presentation of Patta passport, modification of the entries, persons for 11 furnished information, and appeal and revision and board of suits. And here certificate copies are of record to be annexed to the plaint or application. When a plaint or application is filed before the concerned authority, then the certificate copies of this Patta passport has to be applied, annexed with the application in the suit as well as the application made. And also there shall be a penalty for failure to furnish information, and that already dealt with the duty to furnish the information to the Tahsildar when it is required. And if it is then there will be a penalty. It goes with the penalty for furnishing false information also is there, and cognizance offense is also there. No court shall take cognizance of any offense punishable under this act except on complaint in writing made by an officer authorized in this view of the government. So that is a taking cognizance of the offense is made subject to the person concerned, authorized person concerned, making this complaint. And the protection of action is there. That's not it. This 21, section 21 is important. The provisions of this act shall have effect notwithstanding anything inconsistent therewith contained in any other law, custom, or usage of contract. Then the power to make them. And the another important thing is, so far we have been dealing with land, agricultural land. The agricultural land for which patta passbook is given.
Already I submitted about a case where one landowner sold the land to another person second time due to a third party. Then it came to the court, Madurai bench of the Madras High Court. His Lordship Mr. G. R. Swaminathan held in that is reported in 2019 volume 6 CTC page 62. He held that if a transfer is sought to be effective without the relevant revenue records before the registering officer, such registration of sale would not be valid, and thus he invalidated the second sale made by the landowners. So this is most important decision in this aspect as far as Passbook Act, Patta Passbook Act is concerned. And again, we have to see there are village records. Village records mostly the basic person, employee in the revenue system is the village administrative officer. The village administrative VAO is called, and he should be in possession of certain documents. And these documents are: one, field measurement book records that records the extent with the measurement, details of the land, survey number, and subdivision, whether it and a provoke other subdivisions of the that's called field measurement book of the entire village unit. And this will have that there is another record called settlement A register, which is normally called A register, settlement A register, normally called A register, and contains details of village, irrigation channel, whether it is Prombok, whether it is Tarisu or wasteland, and the population of the village, and the survey number, subdivision, old or new, and the character of the land, whether Nanja or Punja, and the land tax would be entered into that book, in that book itself. Then there is a village map. The village map will show the details of certain numbers, map of the land, and other details regarding Porambok, road, temple, tank, and village Nattam, names of villages, and the total extent of the village. Adangal register is there. That Adangal register is the most important one. It is used in litigations normally. And Adangal register would show the survey number and the subdivisions, source of irrigation, patta number, extent of land, and land tax assessment, nature of the crops. All these would be entered regularly by the village administrative officer, and the revenue inspector, then Tahsildar, shall make endorsements in the Adangal itself. There is what is called a chitta. In chitta, the names of the pattadar, lands in his holding, land tax assessment, details of joint pattadar, and in the last page, the extent patta wise the land, the tax, and the character of the land, whether Nanja or Punja, would be recorded. It's important to state that the village administrative officer has to maintain the above records regularly by making relevant and necessary entries. The Honorable Division Bench of the Madras High Court, headed by Chief Justice His Lordship M.A. Iqbal and His Lordship T.S. Swaminathan, held that the village administrative officers should reside in the concerned village. Unless these VOs are residing in the village, then it will be the entire arrangement. As I submitted already, the entire revenue system is functioning, the land relationship is there, the land tenure is properly carried through only with the help of this village administrative officer. People have to approach him now and then for everything, and therefore he should reside in the village. He should reside in the village. He should reside in the village. Then the legal head certificate has to be issued by the Tahsildar as per the direction of the Lordship, His Lordship T.S. Srinyanam in WP MD number 16233 bar 2014 dated 25/9/2014 regarding the transfer of Patta. The following judgment is rendered by the Honorable High Court reported in 2012-3 volume CTC 823. So the legal heir certificate, normally succession certificate is issued, succession certificate issued under Succession Act. But this is there is no statutory basis for the heirship certificate being issued by the Tahsildar. And it creates a lot of problems also. That is why His Lordship's decision is most important than this issue, the legal heirship issue has to be gone into. And I am submitting the other aspect also. I have omitted basically for a particular reason one particular legislation called the Survey and Boundaries Act. Tamil Nadu Survey and Boundaries Act 1923. You all know that this survey is the most important aspect of it. Survey is the most important aspect in respect of the land tenure. It is to the credit of the British. The entire region in the country, India, had been surveyed properly. And that now we are enjoying the benefit. And this law, the Tamil Nadu legislation regarding Survey and Boundaries Act is a very important act that creates a lot of litigations also. And in this act, there are mostly 3 sections that are mostly important. One is section 9, 11, 13, and 14. Section 9 provides proper survey. The survey officer shall have power to determine and record as undisputed any boundary in respect of which no dispute is brought to his notice. That is notice to be registered holders of land affected. Notice, subclass 2, notice of every decision of the survey officer under section 9(1) shall be given in the prescribed manner to the registered holders of the lands of the the boundaries of which may be affected by the decision. Then section 10 provides power of survey officer to determine and record a disputed boundary. And again, section 11 provides for appeals against the orders and at 9 and 10. And section 12 provides for period within which appeal should be preferred to the higher officer, higher authority against the therefore this period within which an appeal under section 11 shall be preferred within 1 month from the date of service of notice under section 9 or 10, provided that the time taken to obtain a copy of the decision and the map shall not be included in the period of 1 month allowed for appeal. Proviso is there. Then 12A is second appeal. It provides a second appeal that shall lie to such authority as may be prescribed against the orders passed on appeal by the appellate authority under section 11, and the provisions of this section 11 shall so far as may be applied to such appeal. And 12B provides for revision. And the revision director of survey and settlement may on his own motion call for and examine an order passed or proceedings recorded under sections 11 or 12A to satisfy himself as to the regularity of such proceedings or the correctness or correctness, legality, or propriety of any decision or any or order passed therein. And if in any case it appears to the director of survey and settlement that any such proceeding, decision, or order should be modified, annulled, reversed, or remitted for reconsideration, he may pass orders accordingly, provided that the director of survey and settlement shall not pass any order prejudicial to any party unless he has been given a reasonable opportunity of being heard, provided further that no revision shall be made after the issue of the modification specified in section 3:13. Subclass 2, director survey settlement shall not pass any order under subsection 1 if the time for appeal against the order at that order or for filing a suit in the civil court has not expired. The order has been made, third, B. The order has been made the subject of an appeal, or if a revision to any appellate authority prescribed under this act, or the order has been made the subject of a suit instituted in a civil court. Then again, completion of demarcation to be notified. That is section 13. When the survey of any land, or a boundary which has been notified under section 5 has been completed in accordance with the orders passed under section 9, 10, 11, 12A or 12B. The survey officer shall notify the fact in the district gazette, and a copy of such notification shall be passed in the village chowdi, if any of the village to which the survey relates, unless the survey so notified is modified by the decree of a civil court under the provisions of section 14. The record of the survey shall be conclusive proof that the boundaries determined and recorded therein have been correctly determined and recorded. And section 14 provides, this is the most important section, any person deeming himself aggrieved by the determination of any boundary under section 9, 10, 11, 12A or 12B may, subject to the provisions of parts 2, 3 of the Liberation Act 1963, institute a suit within 3 years from the date of the notification under section 13 to set aside or modify the said determination, and the survey shall, if necessary, be altered in accordance with the final decree in the suit, and the alteration, if any, should be noted in the record. The plaintiff in such suit shall join as parties to it all persons whom he has reason to believe to be interested in the boundary which is the subject matter of the suit. Now, the most important thing in these things are that there may be a suit filed. When the suit can be filed, any person deeming himself aggrieved by any determination of any boundary under 9, 10, 11, 12A or 12B may file the suit, subject to limitation. But this is particular when a notice is issued under section 13, whether any provision of section 9, 10, 11, 12A or 12B can be resorted to is a question, and it has been answered that such a suit does not lie. Such a petition does not lie, and when the suit is pending, such a petition filed by the parties concerned, or without filing a suit after the notification issued under section 13. If any person adopts a method of filing a petition before the authority under section 10 or 11 or anything, or 12, 12A, etc., such petitions do not lie at all. It is violation of the statutory provision. Therefore, this issue was decided by the Honorable High Court in 2020, reported in 2020, volume 1, Writ Law Reporter, page 635. And then it is held clearly that when there is a suit pending, the person who has obtained an order with some of the authorities under section 11 or 12, and if that authority the order is passed, that order passed has been negatived by the court. It was directed to be deleted. The order has been quashed by the Honorable High Court and directed the parties concerned to resort to the suit that is pending, and the matter has to be decided thereby. Therefore, pending the suit, the changes that has been made has been deleted, directed by the court that the earlier position that was there in the record had to be kept up until the decision is rendered properly by the civil court. And it has been directed, the civil court has to decide the matter within a reasonable time fixed for with that case. So my submission would be these survey records are I think they are one of the sources of litigations in the rural side mostly, and even in the urban side. The land tenure problem is involving the survey boundary. The boundaries are mostly problematic one. Therefore, these issues have to be gone into, and the decisions have to be understood properly. And also, I submit that there is a problem now. These are all the special courts, special offices who are having jurisdiction to decide. And the civil court, whether it is having a right to hear or not, is decided by many authorities, as is submitted already, County onwards, case onwards. And there is another issue also. When the order is passed within the jurisdiction, then it is a matter, it is illegal or anything, it can be gone into. When a matter is passed, when an order is passed without jurisdiction by an entity, by an authority, then it is void, as it is well known. The latest Supreme Court decision in this regard is most important, and the reason is our Lordship previously was here. His Lordship V. Ram Subramanian has rendered a decision on this count, and regarding the special court or special entities, special tribunals, whether has got a right to decide a matter when and in this matter whether Article 226 will be applicable and the High Court can be seized of the matter in question. His Lordship has clearly found that when he has discussed elaborately, his Lordship has clearly held that when the matter is without jurisdiction, and when the matter is in paragraph 24, yes, will clearly held that, because I am submitting this ruling for the reason that the matter in these cases, in the case of land tenure, such situations may arise when an order is passed. That order may be in paragraph 24. So far as the question of exercise of the power conferred by Article 26, despite the availability of a statutory alternative remedy is concerned, Anismiri case cannot be relied upon. The distinction between the lack of jurisdiction and the wrongful exercise of available jurisdiction should certainly be taken into account by the High Courts when Article 226 is sought to be invoked, bypassing a statutory alternative remedy provided by a special statute. So I submit that this land tenure land tenure is mostly interesting subject, and in this subject, I submit that people are mostly agricultural landholders, and the persons connected with the same, the tenants, cultivating tenants, all these persons are terribly affected, or sometimes they are overcome with problems, and these problems have to be dealt with. And I submit that I request my learner friends to try to get the basic book on the land tenure in Madras Presidency by Sanduraj Iyengar. And another, I request my learner friends to look into another book, interesting book by the law college professor by name by land laws in Tamil Nadu by Professor A. Chandrasekharan. I request my learned friends, it is available, it may be available in library also, that this book is a very nice book on land tenure, and it deals with history beautifully, and the history of the land tenure beautifully, and the land laws also are dealt with properly. Therefore, I request my learned friends to have a nice time with these books as much as possible. That's all. I thank you very much.
Thank you once again for readily accepting our request and taking us through the land tenure and its importance and various legislations involved in this field. Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking us through.
Very well, sir. Very well, sir.
Nandri, vanakkam, sir.
I'm very happy to
Thank you,
have
sir.
been